the best damn team in the land resides right here in Columbus. The national championship trophy is back where it belongs in the great state of Ohio. And no matter where you are, over the next year across the globe, when you hear someone say, oh wait, you say,
may not have been the season we all expected for Ohio State, but definitely the finish, I think, when we looked at this roster on paper, we thought this Buckeyes squad could be the team to lift the college football playoff trophy at the end of the year, and that's exactly what they did. So much talent on this team, but I want to hone in on one guy in particular who we've talked a lot about. We're going to continue to talk a lot about. That is freshman wide receiver Jeremiah Smith. We're already throwing out the term generational talent when it comes to this guy. I think that we have to define first what generational talent means exactly. I think it's safe to say that us naming him the number one player in last year's class was absolutely correct, but it's one thing to be in that extra upper echelon. So, Coop, what does that mean to you? Why do you think there's maybe some truth to that discussion?
All right, you and I are on a different side of the coin here on this conversation. Now, I think the biggest thing that we need to establish is common ground before we head into this conversation. Very important. And I thought about that because over the last 2 years, I'm sitting here, I'm thinking to myself, you know what? That gets thrown around way too much. And we're talking about generational players. Last year was Caleb Williams. We'll see. Last year was Marvin Harrison Jr. We'll see. The list kind of goes on and on. So what is a generational player? And when you're talking about a guy like Jeremiah Smith, what does that mean? Like, let's get into the nitty gritty, right? We're talking about a guy that was born in 2005 of November, a guy that was 18 throughout much of his freshman season. And if you're going to put him in that Gen Z, which is where he fits with, right, which is going to be some guys after him that are included as well, the guys that come to mind are guys like Justin Jefferson, who is on pace to really kind of break almost every receiving record in the NFL. Jamar Chase comes to mind. CeeDee Lamb comes to mind. Those would be the guys. Then I would ask, who are the generational guys out of those three maybe that come to mind for you? And I could get on board with Justin Jefferson. My point with Jeremiah Smith is I think he's a walking definition of what a generational talent is. There is so much ambiguity around what the definition is, but to see a guy with his size, 6'3", 215 pounds, this is 3 straight years of 1,000 yards receiving, and people will say, well, yeah, 2 years back in high school, the genetics, the cousin of Geno Smith. You talk about a guy that broke pretty much every record at Ohio State, receiving yards in a game, 187 against the number one team in the country in the Rose Bowl. Big-time players make big-time plays in big moments, right? The other one, receiving yards in a season, receptions in a season, belonged to Chris Carter, TDs in a season. I get it. They played a longer season. I understand all that. Here's the thing. I knew he was the number one player in the country. I get the accolades. You go back and you say, what tells the truth here? The tape. And you watch the tape of this guy, watch every single target last night. He's the best player I've ever scouted. And I don't say that lightly. I've been alive for 32 years. I've been consuming football since I was 5 for 27 years. This is it. By far, this is a guy over the last 35 years. You look at all the guys in the Hall of Fame. You look at all the guys that have led the NFL in receiving. And I know this is long-winded. There's maybe 5 guys that I would take at the same position. Randy Moss, Terrell Owens, Calvin Johnson, Julio Jones, Jerry Rice. Okay, so the combination of the size, speed, athleticism, ability to beat you anywhere on the field, take the top off the defense, the strength at the catch point, the dependability, all of it. If God could create a receiver, he'd create Jeremiah Smith, and he is perfect in every single way. So I think he's got a gold jacket. If he stays healthy, all that thing's coming down the line. Not only do I love this kid, I respect the way that he plays the game. The social maturity is off the charts.
So you like him a little bit?
I like him a little bit. He's the man. He is the man.
I've seen your face during this.
Well,
they told me to say 2 sentences, and I said
no,
2
no. I let
He's
you.
clearly very
I let you
passionate
cook
about
for a long time because this is your guy.
He's not my guy. He's Andrew Ivins' guy.
Well, Coop, you went on for a while now.
Is Jeremiah Smith a generational talent?
No.
Why not?
I think he's a very good football player. And when you hear the conversation, you hear the comment, you hear once in a generation. Mm-hmm. Like you hear once. I've seen this before. This is Andre Johnson. This is Andre. If you want to put him in the Julio Jones category, I don't believe so. Is he a better college receiver than Julio Jones? Absolutely, because Julio wasn't a developed receiver. What you talking about, specimen, catch the ball at 2 yards, put his head on the goalpost. I've seen Jeremiah Smith get caught from behind. I haven't seen Julio get caught from behind. And when I talk about generational talent, you have to have said, I've never seen this before on this athlete. Forget the accolades, forget the stats. We're talking about pure ability and skill set. Does he run a 4.2? Does he run a 4.3?
Probably 4.4s.
Yeah, 6'3", 215, 4.4. You can find those guys. But you're not finding 6'3", 4.3, vertical 42, broad jump 11.4 on a broken foot. That's what Jonesy did at the combine. And in the first 10 years, Jonesy had more yards, production. He put 350 yards on an NFL player. So when I'm talking about generation, I want to see a player that I've never once in my lifetime going to see. That's Shaquille O'Neal. That's Megatron. That's Tyreek Hill. I've never seen speed and burst from a guy like that ever. But I've seen this guy before. And I'm not doubting that he should be the first overall pick whenever he comes out, or he's either number one recruit of last year. Absolutely. The best receiver in college, no doubt. But generational talent, no, because I've seen this before. I played against it before.
Granted, he's 18 years old. He hadn't even scratched the surface. Everybody looks at Jeremiah Smith and they say, oh, Jeremiah Smith, I've seen him. Listen, Julio's going to put up better numbers at the combine. He did. And I get that point. Julio was not as developed as that kid. And that's probably an argument in Julio's case. I completely understand that. Best football is ahead of this kid. He's different cat, different breed. You also have a couple years on me. No offense. You know, I watched Julio Jones when I was a kid as an LSU fan. This cat is the most different kid I have ever seen. And it's disrespectful to call him a kid because he's a man amongst boys. He also stepped into an offense that had Emeka Egbuka, who's a first-round receiver, that had Travion Henderson, that's going to go day 2 of the NFL draft, that had Quinshawn Junkins, that's going to go day 2 of the NFL draft, that has a perennial all-pro on the other side in Caleb Downs, JT Tuimalau, Jack Sawyer, go down the list, Denzel Burke, all these guys. Who's the best player in the team? Hands down. At 18 years old, making a lot of guys that are going to make a lot of money on Sundays very stupid. Very stupid, excuse me. I understand the argument. That being said, generational, what generation are we talking about? If we're talking about a once in 100 years, yeah, Julio Jones is the guy that you would compare him to. The fact that this is even a conversation to Julio Jones's skill set at the age of 18 is a testament to Jeremy.
And what I'm saying to you, it's not a conversation with Julio Jones. It's a conversation with Andre Johnson.
I respectfully disagree.
Andre's a Hall of Famer.
And I'm not taking anything away from Andre Johnson.
If you look at their stats and look at the way they play, very similar.
From a physique standpoint.
Temperament, play, style, Andre. Like, you don't see Jeremiah put one foot in the ground and explode like a wind.
I did. Multiple times. I went back and I can go. I can show you the Oregon game. I can look at multiple examples. Big Ten play. Him running away from defenders at 215 pounds. It's all there.
So,
I also want to see the time he got caught.
We just watched him get caught. Go back and pull game film up. You've seen him get caught from behind.
You and I can
go
do it.
In the national championship game?
No. But go cut the film on. He's gotten caught from behind.
We'll watch it.
So, Smoke, if it's all measurables for you, I think you're disagreeing on the fact that Cooper's saying the fact that we're having this conversation now at 18 bodes well for his future. But if you're saying it's just these measurable things that he doesn't have now, is he ever going to be considered a generational talent?
To Coop, yes. To Gerald, no. And to most people,
you?
No, not to me. Not to me. Okay. I don't think I think he's a very good
So the conversation
player.
Is wrapped up.
It's wrapped up for me.
Even though he's 18 years old.
18 don't matter. You knew when Julio Jones stepped on the field at 18 years old, you knew he was different from everybody. You take Julio and drop him in the 90s, he's the best receiver. Early 2000s, the best receiver. 2010s, the best receiver. You take Julio, prime Julio right now, and put him in the NFL. He's better than Jefferson, Chase, and all those guys. And those guys aren't generational players either. They're very good football players. There's nothing wrong with that. But don't throw them in the word of generation because I've never seen anything like that.
I think we have a different idea of what generational means.
Once in a generation is the word that we usually use.
Okay. This is a very interesting discussion, and I want to get one more. Oh, see, we're friends here. I want to get one more person's take on this because we're going to welcome in our friend Dave Biddle, who is here from Bucknuts.com. And Dave, we're going to have a deeper discussion about everything happening with Ohio State. But I'm curious, your perspective. What do you think about this talk of Jeremiah Smith, generational talent? You've seen him up close and personal there in Columbus. What do you think?
First of all, if you're an Ohio State fan and people are arguing, is he better than Julio Jones?
It's a good discussion, yeah.
Business. I will say this, being a Bengals fan, A.J. Green was taken one spot ahead of Julio Jones. And if A.J. Green had Matt Ryan throwing him the ball and Andy Dalton not throwing him the ball, who knows what we'd be talking about. Maybe A.J. Green would be ahead of Julio Jones. Both are great. Another thing I'll say, being a Bengals fan and following Ohio State and the Bengals very close, tell you what, Jamar Chase is fantastic. He's a generational talent. Jeremiah Smith, to me, is basically Jamar Chase 3 inches taller. Here's why. He catches the ball, and he's like a running back. Okay, he's got the best ball skills I have seen. He goes up and catches it. Oregon had a play where they had 3 guys on him. Didn't matter. He just went up and caught it. So he can do all of that a tall receiver can do. But then he can do the same thing that a Jamar Chase can do. You throw him a little screen pass, he can go the distance. He's tough as heck. He's very disciplined. He's absolutely a generational talent.
Okay. There we go. Last word here from Dave Biddle. I will add Jeremiah Smith had 11 more touchdowns than our friend Julio Jones did as a freshman, Sophie. But like you said, this is a good problem to have if you're comparing a freshman wide receiver with one Julio Jones. Let's get into what actually happened this season for Ohio State. I'll call it complicated. You had the loss to Michigan. You had fans wanting to fire Ryan Day at one point. But then you win a national title. So, Dave, how do you encapsulate what this season meant for Ohio State?
Yeah, it's unbelievable, Emily. It's a storybook. It reminds me so much of 10 years ago where Ohio State was left for dead multiple times, rightfully so, entering camp 10 years ago. Braxton Miller got hurt, left for dead. Then they lost to a very average Virginia Tech team at home, left for dead. And then J.T. Barrett gets hurt against Michigan, left for dead. And then they go on a magical 3-game postseason run. This year was 4 games, and we'll never know for sure, Emily. But I wonder if they didn't lose to Michigan, would they have still won the national championship? Everybody at Ohio State would tell you, yeah, we still would have won the national championship. But that seemed to have woken them up and really motivated them. And it was a magical run. And then despite Ryan Day's 1-4 record against Michigan, including 4 straight losses, he's a legend in Columbus for life now, winning this national championship. National title banners fly forever.
Yeah, a natty cures all, as they like to say. Looking at this roster, I mean, we just discussed Jeremiah Smith, but also Cooper fired out some fantastic players that we're going to see go in April's draft very, very high. What can other programs maybe learn about how this Ohio State team and its infamous $20 million roster was constructed?
I think the biggest thing is keeping your veteran players around, which is would not have been possible in the pre-NIL era. Now, if you're going to be a top 10 pick, good luck with that. But if you're a second round, third round projection, which Ohio State had a lot of those guys that came back, guys that were main cogs on this national championship team, Jack Sawyer, J2 Tuimoloau, I could go on and on and on. That's the main thing, Emily, is keeping your veteran players around. That could be second day NFL draft picks, but get them to come back for one more year, take care of them when they're still making a lot of money, and maybe they can increase their draft stock and win a national championship, or at least compete for one. And then the other thing is you have to do well in the transfer portal. What's crazy is I've heard people say Ohio State bought a national championship team. Well, they brought in all of 5 transfers. 5. They just hit on all of them. They had Will Howard, Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Downs. Seth McLaughlin was the best center in the country, won the Remington Award, even though he was lost for the season with an injury late in the year. And then Will Kazmarek wasn't a home run, but he was a really good backup tight end. So they only brought in 5 transfers, but 4 of them are grand slams. So the biggest thing is keeping your players around. Player retention is the number 1 thing, and then you have to hit the portal. That's number 2, and it's a close number 2.
And the players they're retaining are the ones that they recruited. So could you maybe make the argument that recruiting is still the lifeblood of the sport, despite the fact that the transfer portal gets all the shine these days?
Absolutely. I think if you have a good culture in college football, you're going to keep the majority of your players. If you have mass exoduses of players you want to keep, that is not a good sign. And you're going to lose players. Ohio State lost players even after the national championship run. Guys that stuck around, will have a ring, already announced they're going to be in the portal. But even before then, they lost a couple of guys. That's going to happen. That's natural. But if you have tons of guys leaving, not good. So it says a lot about the culture of any program when guys that could leave stick around and, want to be part of. Ohio State calls it the brotherhood. Some people make fun of that, but these guys are pretty tight. I've never seen a team really this tight. They really lacked clicks. You see football teams, they all have their clicks, right? This team, I'm sure they had their clicks, but maybe the least amount of clicks I've seen on a football team.
We've all been in high school. We've all been in college. We know that's sometimes just the dynamic of how it goes. All right, for all this talk about retention and bringing back guys, man, that has not applied so far to the coaching staff in this offseason. You lose both coordinators. You lose your offensive line coach. A lot of them going to the NFL, but of course the Jim Knowles to Penn State is a gut punch a little bit when it comes to going to a rival. But overall, I mean, where does Ohio State go from here in terms of filling those very important spots?
Yeah, I think they're going to do a lot of hiring from within, Emily. Ohio State fans might not be thrilled with that, but Ryan Day, I think, has earned the benefit of the doubt. And by the way, he was hired from within too, so he probably, was a little biased there. But I did see this stat that Nick Saban during his time at Alabama went through 9 different offensive coordinators and 6 different defensive coordinators. So maybe this is just it goes with the territory if you're lucky enough to win a national title. Hopefully Ryan Day, for his sake, can win maybe a third of amount of the national titles that Nick Saban won. But yeah, I think what they're going to do on defense is they're going to promote Matt Guerrieri and Tim Walton, who are the secondary coaches right now. I think they're going to be co-coordinators. Ryan Day, it spoke volumes to me, Emily, at the national championship celebration at the Horseshoe last Sunday, said Matt Guerrieri is one of the rising stars in our profession. He's one of the most brilliant minds, young minds in college football. I'm like, wow, this young man is 35, and Ryan Day is saying that about him at the national championship celebration. That said a lot. But you're not going to promote him over Tim Walton. So I think those guys are going to be co-defensive coordinators. They're going to bring in someone from the outside. And looks like Brian Hartline is going to be the new offensive coordinator. New in quotes. He's had the title of offensive coordinator even last year with Chip Kelly here. Brian Hartline wasn't co-offensive coordinator. He was offensive coordinator / wide receivers coach. He didn't call the plays. He didn't call the plays the previous year. And maybe he won't call the plays this coming year. Maybe it'll be Ryan Day again. But Brian Hartline sounds like will be the new offensive coordinator. And I won't be surprised if they bring in Kevin Wilson back to Columbus as a co-offensive coordinator, O-line coach.
If Hartline is calling those plays, we're going to see a lot more of Jeremiah Smith, as if that were even possible when the wide receivers coach gets promoted there. How do you anticipate the offense to change depending on who ends up calling plays?
Yeah, I don't think it'll change too much because this will still be Ryan Day's offense. It really will. Like, even with Chip Kelly here, it was really, I mean, obviously those guys, like, Chip Kelly was Ryan Day's mentor until Ryan Day became the boss, which is a heck of an interesting dynamic. So I don't think the offense is going to change tremendously, but obviously, Emily, whoever is the offensive coordinator is going to have their fingerprints on it. It's interesting with Brian Hartline, him being a wide receiver, you think, oh, yeah, it's going to be pass happy. But then when he played at Ohio State, he played under Jim Tressel, a little bit more of a running guy. But one of Hartline's years, they were kind of pass happy. Troy Smith won the Heisman in 2006 when Hartline was a wide receiver at Ohio State. So I don't think the offense will change too much. They're very determined to be balanced, running and passing. But, if you're a wide receiver, you're probably not too upset if Brian Hartline taking over the play calling duties.
Certainly makes you feel good. But as you've pointed out, you got to follow the mentors, too, to see potentially who those guys learned under. Dave Biddle, thank you so much for tying a bow on this Ohio State season and looking ahead a little bit. We do appreciate it. You can check out more of his work at bucknuts.com. We didn't even get into the 16 of 22 starters that this Ohio State team has to replace from that national championship winning team. We didn't get into it on this show, but I guarantee you they are all over it at bucknuts.com.